Blake Lively, Part 12. What is she really like? Matters escalated following the friction that was apparent in relation to the press and promotional tour of It Ends With Us, when a New York Times story was published on December the 21st. This broke the news that Lively had filed a legal complaint against Baldoni, his production company, and a host of PR agents. The bringing of the lawsuit might be seen as an assertion of control, or it might be seen as a genuine victim seeking redress for unpleasant and unlawful conduct towards her. The details were certainly interesting. We'll be getting into more of that in due course, but a brief summary includes allegations that Lively said Baldoni improvised unwanted kissing on set and discussed his sex life. She said he watched her topless, having her body makeup removed. She said he entered her trailer uninvited while she breastfed. Her husband, Reynolds, said that Baldoni fat-shamed her by asking an on-set fitness trainer how much she weighed. Finally, when she complained, Baldoni then set a team of reputation destroyers on her who set out to bury her with various negative stories. We'll be analysing these allegations later to determine what this tells us, but those are serious allegations and raise the possibility that Baldoni's the actual villain here and Blake Lively is an individual that has been mistreated. Now, it's also important to keep in mind that a narcissist can be mistreated as well and will respond in a particular way which is similar to, but for different reasons, to that of a non-narcissist. So it could be the case that either Baldoni is the perpetrator and Lively is a non-narcissist victim. Baldoni's a perpetrator and Lively, as a narcissist, is the victim of his behaviour. Or it is not as Lively has suggested, that Baldoni didn't behave in the way alleged and that she is the one making false allegations in order to cause a problem for him. It would appear that the allegations surrounding the negative stories is Lively's explanation for the fact that around the time of the film's release, various unflattering statements she'd made in the past rather mysteriously resurfaced. For instance, the Norwegian journalist Kjersti Flair interview that I mentioned in the previous part. This Times story was co-written by Megan Tuhey, one of the journalists who exposed Harvey Weinstein's sexual misconduct in 2017. In effect, this read as a textbook #MeToo tale, made all the more ironic by the detail that Baldoni has very much cast himself as a feminist ally, man bun and all. Indeed, he built a career around being one, writing books entitled Man Enough, Undefining My Masculinity, and Boys Will Be Human. Is this the case of an individual holding himself out as a feminist ally when in actual fact he's a predator, and that Blake Lively has been the victim of sexual misconduct and therefore has involved a journalist who uncovered the established and convicted sexual misconduct of Harvey Weinstein? Alternatively, is this a calculated step undertaken for the purposes of trying to destroy somebody's career in order to respond to a potential threat to control or to achieve some kind of residual benefit? After the Times article went live, Baldoni was hit with a barrage of outrage. This feminist man had ogled Blake Lively, kissed her without her consent, and then sought to stop her speaking her truth with a smear campaign that had, according to the Times, branded her as tone-deaf, difficult to work with, and a bully. Might all of these allegations, where one could assume that she was behaving in a narcissistic fashion, actually be a fabrication generated by Baldoni? Sales of her new hair care line plummeted as a consequence of these allegations against her. It would appear that people had failed to believe her. Then, on December the 31st, 2024, Baldoni sued the New York Times for $250 million on the basis of libel, accusing the paper of accepting a self-serving narrative. It then followed up 2 weeks later by suing Lively and Reynolds for defamation and extortion, seeking $400 million in damages. The damning evidence landed on January the 31st when Baldoni published a 168-page timeline of events, which included numerous text messages that he exchanged with Lively that support his claims that the actress had waged her own smear campaign against him. Thus, the evidence tends to support that she is the one that has been smearing Baldoni and not the other way around. Could this be huge hypocrisy on her part? Could it be the case that we have an individual that has decided that she wants to assert control over him because she regards him as a threat to control, and that there are potentially things that have happened in relation to the movie that are problematic for her? One of the most obvious would be that there was some kind of emotional or sexual connection between Baldoni and Lively, it happens, and that Reynolds found out about this, that he castigated Lively for it, and she played victim by saying, "He came on to me, he sexually harassed me." And therefore, this was an individual that had willingly gone along with some kind of affair, or quite possibly had fallen for Baldoni without him seeking to seduce her. Might it be that Lively exhibited absence of boundary recognition on her part and infidelity towards Reynolds by pursuing Baldoni, and either something happened or he rejected her, and either way, the rejection or the fact that Reynolds became aware of what was going on meant that this threatened her control over Reynolds, and she therefore had to respond to that by blame shifting onto Baldoni. Now, all of that is speculation. We don't have any actual evidence that any affair took place. We know that they were close as a consequence of the roles that they were playing. We know that there was physical contact between them because of part of the acting that was required. We also know of Reynolds' behaviour. We've established that he's a narcissist, and therefore it is not too much of a leap to have that narcissist see his wife with a handsome man, and Baldoni is objectively a handsome man, so that Reynolds could well leap to conclusions as to what's going on and issue accusations. Those accusations might be founded on something, they could be false, but if they're directed towards another narcissist, they're a threat to control, which would result in Lively having to nullify them. And the easiest way to do so, and this is commonly the case with a narcissist that's caught out when they've engaged in some form of infidelity, is to suggest that they are the innocent victim and the other person has come onto them, has pursued them, has raped them, has sought to push a relationship onto them, that has harassed them. We're going to come back to that at a later stage to look at the dynamic between all of these parties once we've established more about who they are. But it's worthwhile offering that as potential explanation as part of encouraging you to think about what has actually gone on here and what it is that you are witnessing in terms of the behaviours. Now, returning to what Baldoni published, the communiques between the two of them certainly show Baldoni as sensitive to the point of being self-effacing. However, the text messages that were disclosed caused Lively to appear to be flirty, self-regarding, and something of a bully. Now, I don't propose to go through all of the texts. That will take far too long. But there was one that stood out for me in particular, and it's quite interesting given its content. This text was sent on the 8th of April 2023. Lively wrote, I can send you my pass at the roof or just read with you when we get together next week. Let me know what you prefer. If you knew me in person longer, you'd have a sense of how flirty and yummy the ball busting would play. It's my love language, spicy and playfully bold, never with teeth. And him serving it back to her is just as important. You don't usually see both the man and woman with such agency and humour. Anyway, I can act it out for you next week to make sure it comes through, or I can send now. Let me know what you prefer. Kiss, kiss. A text of that nature, talking about her being flirty and yummy, that it's her love language, it's spicy and playfully bold, is demonstrative of someone that is being flirtatious with her communication. A married woman that's writing to her co-star in terms of saying, if you knew me in person longer, i.e., if you got to know me, you'd know how my ball busting of you is actually flirty and yummy. I'm not doing it to hurt you. I'm doing it as part of flirtation with you. It is part of the way that I roll, that it's done in a way actually to tell you that I like you. Such behaviours show a lack of boundary recognition and a lack of emotional empathy towards both Baldoni and also towards her husband Reynolds to behave in such a manner. It's also the case that Lively repeatedly asked to rewrite crucial scenes of the movie. This is something that Baldoni alleged in his lawsuit. It's his movie. He's the one that optioned it. He's the one that secured the rights. He was the one that was directing it, and he'd hired a writer already. Yet along comes Lively and inserts herself into the production, claiming that she wants to improve it by rewriting crucial scenes. She might just think that she's trying to help, but this behaviour does again demonstrate an absence of boundary recognition, an absence of emotional empathy for Mr. Baldoni and also the existing writer, who was actually rather charitable about the fact that when they later found out that it was indeed Ryan Reynolds who had undertaken the rewrite in respect of the roof scene. Lively also finally admitted at a later juncture that it was her husband that had written that scene, something that she had passed off as her own, which was a lie. Furthermore, she'd involved her husband, who had nothing to do with the production, into it, which demonstrates a lack of boundary recognition on both her part and his, and an absence of emotional empathy for those affected by it. Initially, Baldoni resisted her rewrites, and she then made what was a clear threat. If you ever get around to watching Game of Thrones, responded Lively, you'll appreciate that I'm Khaleesi, grandiosity, and like her, I happen to have a few dragons. That appears to be a veiled threat to suggest if you don't do what I want, I'm going to launch my dragons at you. My dragons also protect those I fight for, so really we all benefit from those gorgeous monsters of mine. You will too, I can promise you. This reads like promised gain. Baldoni alleges that a couple of days before that particular text was sent, Lively had her friend Taylor Swift turn up at the tail end of a meeting with him, Swift being one of Lively's dragons allegedly sent to defend her. Is that simply Lively using a friend? Or is it indicative of an individual that is utilising a lieutenant? Something to consider. In response to the text, Baldoni followed up with a grovelling 7-minute voice note apologising for not being more sensitive. I'm a very flawed man, he said, as my wife will attest, but I will always apologise and then find my way back to centre. That is one thing I can assure you of. Thus, the picture that has come out of the information that was shared by Baldoni creates a fuller picture than that which was initially demonstrated by Lively. Is this the selective cherry-picking of information and revision of history of a narcissist? Or is it somebody who simply omitted it by mistake? Which seems rather a strange thing to do, doesn't it? Presumably, your lawyers will have advised you of the obligation to provide all of the material, both good and bad, so that they can objectively advise you as to the strength of your case or otherwise. And yet, having come out of the blocks suggesting that Baldoni was guilty of sexual harassment, what he responded with the provision also of a timeline and evidence of those texts, started to demonstrate a different picture to that which was conveyed by Lively. We're going to continue with a further examination of the allegations and what has gone on in respect of the litigation. As I explained, I'm not going to go through absolutely everything as it would take too long, but rather to pick the key aspects of it for the purposes of understanding more about the behaviour of Blake Lively. Join me in the next part.